India has made a historic move with approval of a goods and services tax. It's a milestone, actually, under the country's leadership of Narendra Modi. Many people see this tax as a game changer for this gigantic economy that's growing fast. So what does India's GST actually mean for emerging markets investors? We're joined by Christine Tan. She's a portfolio manager at Excel Funds. I mean, some people might say, well, I don't care. India gets a GST. Why is this important?
So I think it's important because we are in a world of slowing global growth. So then the question is, for all of us as investors, as portfolio managers, is where's the growth going to come from? So we need, global growth is now with a 2 handle. And India is certainly one of the higher potential sources of growth. You've got 1.25 billion people. The median age is 27. So think of what that means. A lot of individuals still have yet to buy their first everything. So historically, what's happened in India, it's a very complex tax system. As you sort of said earlier, GST, we're used to it now, but we forget we used to have a pretty complicated tax system as well. India
is a nightmare.
Goes beyond that.
Because, I mean, we've added a value-added tax in part, or the harmonized sales tax, to get rid of an obscure manufacturer's sales tax.
Correct.
But you're saying across the nation there was a plethora of duties and taxes and levies?
That's right. So the central government used to levy a number of different taxes, luxury, etc. Then the states would levy their own taxes, and each one had different tax rates. So what would happen is if you're a business looking to go to set up manufacturing hubs, you actually have to think, okay, if I'm in the state of Maharashtra versus Uttar Pradesh, what are different tax systems I need to deal with? And more importantly, when you manufacture in one state, you can't easily sell those goods in another because of that tax system.
Like the Canadian provinces.
Right. So as a manufacturer, you're having to...
Go
That's
on.
right. So as a manufacturer, you're having to set up all these different inefficient, smaller manufacturing facilities instead of hubs. So that's probably one of the biggest changes that will come from this single GST. The corporates in India are very excited because now they can actually centralize everything. Maybe a hub and wheel type of DC system will be what they'll be able to do.
So the Economist magazine saying it's not quite fiscal unification, but it's going to make life simpler.
A lot simpler. And in the long term, and this is always something that, is not necessarily viewed as a positive, but in the long term, you'll see better tax collection because now all of a sudden it's going to be harder for tax evasion because it's a centralized system. Tax revenue should go up for the government, which is great, infrastructure spending, etc. But the companies themselves, because they're able to save on their logistics infrastructure, they've said we can spend more on creating jobs. So it's going to be a very complex implementation process. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's a big step in the right direction.
Yeah, the idea of simplification is great, but just how painful will this implementation be? It just seems, given how sporadic and how widespread the tax policies are today, going to this one policy is a great idea, but is it going to be really hard for them to do that?
It's going to be difficult, and as they always say, the devil's in the details, right? So now the next steps are the states have to actually think about approve it, essentially, on an individual basis. We think they will. Because again, the BJP party, which is under Narendra Modi, they have a pretty strong presence on the state level. And then you have the creation of the GST Council. So they haven't quite set the rate yet, although it's rumored to be around 18%. And then the technology. Now, what India's done, which is different than other countries like Malaysia when they were implementing the GST, they actually hired Infosys, who many of us know, earlier this year.
The big IT services
That's
company.
right,
Sorry,
outsourcer.
Yeah.
So they've started working on the technology side of it as already, and they're expecting to run the beta version to test it in October of this year. So to the extent that they can, there's been a lot that's being done to move forward this implementation. But like you said, it's complex. It will take time. It could take up to a year, maybe 2 years. But I think the key is that it's a very impressive achievement to be able to get approval in both houses.
One of the other challenges that we've always seen with India is their inflation level. Do you think that, when you add a value-add tax like this, there's this kind of general view that inflation might go up? Is that something that's a worry to you at all?
It's a little bit in the short term. So I believe the revenue neutral rate right now of all the different taxes is about 15.5%. In other words, if the tax comes in at 18, technically that means that the cost has gone up slightly. So you might see a little bit of an inflation hit, but you're looking at 30, 40 basis points short term. But in the longer term, I think the benefits of simplification of the logistics and the supply chain will offset that.
So India, if you had to guess, and I know, or not guess, but estimate, how many years is India behind China in getting ready for a massive spend on infrastructure? I mean, I know they're spending a lot right now, but the huge ramp up that China saw, is India
right.
likely to go there?
That's a great question. So we often say India is where China was 10 years ago, but there's a very big fundamental difference, which is the structure of the government. So in China, we have a centrally controlled economy, so it's easier to drive big projects.
It's a dictatorship.
Right. India is a democracy with 5-year election cycles and a lot of different voters, a lot of different interests. Narendra Modi's government is very focused on infrastructure. They've talked about spending $1 trillion US over the next 5 years. It's not going to be driven the same way. So in China, it was top down. Government saying, we want to do this. We think in India, it's going to be more bottom up. So it's going to be companies coming in saying, we want to spend this. And the individual states will have to do what they need to do to draw that capital spending and investment towards their state. And that's what it's going to look like.
Christine, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Christine
Thanks for having
Tan
me.
has been our guest portfolio manager at Excel Funds.